want to bring in our guest, outspoken war critic and supporter of raising the debt limit, Congressman Jim Hines. Congressman is Democrat, represented the southwestern portion of Connecticut in Congress since 2009, and prior to running for office, Vice President at Goldman Sachs. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
All those things, support raising the debt limit, these things that is just like, I love going to the dentist, but you kind of have to, I guess, is the argument many make. Let's get right to it. A lot of white noise has bombarded our audience. What happens come August if you guys can't reach an agreement here on the debt limit and we don't?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say I support raising the debt limit. Look, there is no argument, absolutely no argument, that we cannot raise the debt limit. And an awful lot of Americans think that what we're talking about here is giving the Congress permission to spend new money. Raising the debt limit is just paying the bills that we've incurred over the years. You know, not raising the debt limit would be the equivalent of you and me going to a store, buying an expensive television set, and then when the credit card bill comes, saying we're not going to pay that credit card bill. The thing that's scary about this is that when we say that we may not raise the debt limit, which some people are saying, and they're wrong about that, by the way, they are raising the possibility that the United States would do something it's never done before, which is default on its debt. That is the underpinning, the debt, and the notion that we're risk-free is the underpinning of the entire financial system. So what the Republicans in particular are doing here, and I voted for an increase in the debt ceiling, and you know, obviously that's a politically difficult thing to do, but they are gambling with the full faith and credit of the United States, and it's an irresponsible thing to do.
After the press conference, I heard some of your Republican colleagues obviously taking a different position, and I listened to Rush, something I don't usually do, but I listened to Rush going from one meeting to another today, and the message was pretty simple. Hey, this is the kind of tough love or a shake-up Washington needs. And by the way, they can still pay bills, but they'll be on a case-by-case basis. That the debt limit, if it's not raised, it's not the end of the world here. Democrats are saying the sky's falling when it really isn't. Response?
Well, it's not just Democrats, right? It is Bernanke, who's not a Democrat and chairman of the Federal Reserve. It is the people who understand the capital markets globally an awful lot better than Russia understands them. So what he is saying is a profoundly dangerous thing. Now, he's right about one thing, which is that setting aside the debt limit, which, look, at the end of the day is smoke and mirrors. You know, this was something that was put in place decades ago to make people feel better. Your government has a limit on how much it can borrow. Ever since it was put in place, it's been raised 60 times or so. It's smoke and mirrors, except that if you play games with it like you do right now, capital markets will get worried and it will damage our economy. Now, what is true is that we can't put off, and we shouldn't put off, the hard work of arriving at some kind of an agreement with the tax reform, with the cuts, with the look at Medicare and Social Security that we know we need to do to get this country on a more sustainable path. But what we ought to do is we ought to just take this debt limit thing off the table and then do that hard work, get it done.
And when we bring the panel in next segment, I want to get into what shared sacrifice should look like versus maybe some of the competing visions. But let's talk next about Libya. There was two basic arguments and questions that were raised. One is, Mr. President, is this a fight we should be involved in? And two, did you have the authority, Mr. President, to get us into this fight in the first place? What's the answer?
Well, it's not an easy thing to talk about for me anyway, because, look, I can't argue with the President's decision to intervene when he did it first. It's very clear that Gaddafi was going to kill thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the city of Benghazi. He might have won. He might have turned around this sense of, you know, democratization in the Arab world. So I don't hold him blame. I don't hold him to, I wouldn't take him to task for his initial decision. But one thing I know is that I do not want us committed there over time. We're in Afghanistan. We're in Iraq. These fights are very, very complicated, and at the end of the day need to be led by somebody, particularly the Libyans, but at the end of the day by somebody other than the United States of America. We've spent $1 billion there already, and we just can't afford to continue to do this.
Did the War Powers Act give him the right to do this? Should he have talked to you guys first?
The War Powers Act very clearly gives him the right to act, but then within a 60 to 90 day period, if there are hostilities, he needs to come to the Congress to ask for permission to continue. Now, he's taken the position that these are not hostilities. I don't get that. You know, we are launching the occasional missile, we are refueling aircraft, we are doing...
They said no American blood's been spilled here, no boots on the ground. It's different supporting here other men and material than putting our own in harm's way.
What if a country was launching the occasional missile at the United States and refueling aircraft that were attacking us? We would consider that a hostility.
Fair enough. Last question, and then again, we're going to bring in the panel. On Afghanistan, you've been very vocal here, even before we took out Osama bin Laden, that enough already in terms of the size of our presence and what the mission is over there. how long should we be there? You heard the president's plan. Are we bringing enough guys back and soon enough for your taste?
No, and look, I admire this president. I agree with him on a lot, but I have never agreed with him on the approach with respect to Afghanistan. You know, early on when they were thinking about this, Vice President Biden said what we really want to be doing is not counterinsurgency, which involves hundreds of thousands of people working in communities to build roads, to gain the hearts and minds of the locals. It's what we call nation building. Vice President Biden said, let's do counterterrorism. Let's go after the bad guys. And now we know, and boy, did we ever see it in the early part of May, that the bad guys are in Pakistan. So what are we doing nation building in Afghanistan? Amongst other things, we're losing 1 or 2 of our young people in the military every day. And we're spending $100 billion a year in a mission that I don't know has much of a chance of success. So if I were running the show here, I would take a different approach. I would say, let's have a presence, because we want to take the fight to the terrorists that right now are in Pakistan. And we've been doing that very successfully with Predator strikes and other
So put a number,
activities.
how many troops is necessary to do that?
Look, a lot fewer than the 100,000 plus than we've got right now. I'm not a military strategist, but I could envision a couple of bases out of which we would run operations to disrupt terrorists and forget about trying to build the nation of Afghanistan. We got to build this nation.